She has over 800 friends online, a group chat that never goes quiet, and a calendar that's rarely empty on any given weekend. At 2 in the morning, after a panic attack that came out of nowhere, she scrolled through every single one of those contacts and couldn't find one name she actually felt she could call. This isn't a story about having no friends. It's something stranger than that, and it's becoming remarkably common. Let's call her Grace. By any outside measure, Grace's social life looked enviable. She was invited to things constantly. Her group chats were active, funny, full of inside jokes. She had genuinely warm, easy relationships with dozens of people, co-workers, old classmates, gym friends, a big extended circle built up over years of being generally likable and easy to be around. What almost nobody around her knew was that Grace had a specific, quiet rule she followed in nearly every one of these relationships, without ever consciously deciding to keep things light. She was excellent at being fun, easy, low maintenance, the friend who never brought a heavy mood into the room, who always asked how you were doing and rarely, if ever, answered that question honestly herself when it came back around. This pattern has a specific name in psychological research: high-functioning loneliness, sometimes described as the gap between social contact and genuine social connection. Researchers studying loneliness have found something that surprises most people. Loneliness isn't primarily about how many people you're around or even how often you're around them. It's about whether those interactions include real emotional exposure, whether anyone actually knows what's genuinely going on with you underneath the version of yourself you present. Grace had hundreds of relationships built almost entirely on the surface layer: shared jokes, shared logistics, shared fun. What she didn't have and hadn't had for years was a single relationship where she regularly let herself be seen struggling, uncertain, or afraid. She'd built an entire social life, ironically, around never actually needing anyone in it. This had started, if she traced it back far enough, in her early 20s, after a painful breakup where she'd leaned hard on a close friend, only to feel, later, like she'd been too much. Nobody ever said those exact words to her, but Grace absorbed a lesson from that period regardless. It's safer and more likable to be the friend who's always fine. The panic attack came out of nowhere on an ordinary Tuesday night. Tight chest, racing thoughts, a wave of dread with no clear source. Grace, alone in her apartment, did the thing she always did when something felt wrong. She reached for her phone to find someone to talk to, and then she simply sat there, scrolling, for almost 15 full minutes through contact after contact, unable to find a single name that felt safe to call at that hour, with that much honesty required. It wasn't that these people didn't care about her. It was that Grace had spent years training every one of these relationships toward a specific, shallow depth, and she instinctively understood in that moment that calling any of them with real, unfiltered panic would break an unspoken rule she'd built the entire friendship on. She ended up calling a crisis line instead, not because her situation was severe enough to require one, but because it was, strangely, the only number in her phone she felt she was actually allowed to be that honest with. If this feels uncomfortably familiar, being surrounded by people and still not having anyone to call, hit like right now and subscribe, because every week we look at a hidden psychological pattern like this one. Modern loneliness research increasingly distinguishes between social isolation, which is about the actual number of social contacts a person has, and emotional loneliness, which is about the absence of at least one or two relationships with real depth and vulnerability. A person can score extremely low on the first measure and extremely high on the second, which is precisely what was happening to Grace and what researchers now believe is happening to a growing number of highly social, highly connected people, especially in an era of constant digital contact that can create an illusion of closeness without much of the substance. The uncomfortable truth this research points to is that quantity of connection and quality of connection are almost entirely separate variables. Adding more surface-level contacts doesn't address emotional loneliness at all. Sometimes, as in Grace's case, it can actually mask it more effectively, making the loneliness harder for both the person and the people around them to notice or name. Grace's shift started with something small and uncomfortable. She picked one friend, someone she'd known for over a decade, and told her honestly about the panic attack and the 15 minutes of scrolling that had followed it. It felt like breaking a rule she'd followed for years. Her friend didn't pull away. She said, quietly, "I wish you'd called me. I felt like I only get the fun version of you for years now, and I always wondered if that was on purpose." That conversation became the first of several. Grace didn't overhaul her entire social life. She still loved being the fun, easy friend in most of her relationships, and there was nothing wrong with that. What she deliberately built on top of it was 1 or 2 relationships where she practiced letting the harder, less polished parts of herself show up too. It felt risky every time. It also, slowly, started to feel like something she hadn't had in years, actually being known rather than simply being around. If you have plenty of people around you and still feel a specific, quiet loneliness that doesn't seem to make sense on paper, understand this: connection isn't measured in numbers, and it never was. It's measured in how much of the real you gets to exist inside those relationships. You don't need 800 people who could call you at 2 a.m. You need 1 or 2 who actually can. And that usually starts with letting yourself be the one who calls first. If this story reached you, hit like. Tell us in the comments if you felt this kind of loneliness despite being surrounded by people. And subscribe so you don't miss next week's story. We'll see you in the next one.